Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are looking at a guy who didn't just participate in 19th century cross-cultural communication, he completely turned it upside down. It's a really fascinating historical case study on how radical empathy and literally abandoning your own comfort zones can change the course of history.
So, let's get right into the life of Hudson Taylor. Born back in 1832 to devoted Christian parents in Barnsley, England, Taylor grew up to fundamentally change how the West interacted with the East. His whole legacy? It's really defined by this absolute willingness to blur the lines between us and them, especially during a time when those lines were, very sharply drawn.
Just take a look at this timeline. It highlights a pretty rapid journey, right? It's quite the transformation. He goes from being a teenager in a state of complete spiritual indifference to experiencing this profound conversion at age 17, just from reading a tract at home. And then, a few short years later, he's a dedicated 21-year-old sailing off toward these monumental challenges in China. It's a seriously striking pace of personal development.
Now, he didn't just wing it and jump into this massive task based on sheer enthusiasm. He rigorously equipped himself. Step 1, he studied medicine and basic healthcare, knowing full well that practical help would be absolutely essential. Step 2, he tackled the notoriously difficult Chinese language before he even set sail. And Step 3, he started living simply, actively practicing how to trust God for his basic needs. He was really building this robust foundation for whatever was waiting for him.
And let me tell you, what awaited him was definitely daunting. Arriving in China in 1854, Taylor walked directly into a highly volatile, dangerous landscape. The nation was just plagued by severe political unrest and social difficulties. He was stepping into an environment literally defined by disease, war, and massive cultural divides. So yeah, not exactly a safe or comfortable assignment by any stretch of the imagination.
Which brings us to a fascinating dilemma. And really, it's the core question of this entire explainer. When you're viewed as a total alien in a complex, struggling land, how do you actually build trust? How do you communicate a deeply personal message to people who see you as a complete outsider representing some foreign power?
The sheer contrast in how that question was answered back then is wild. The traditional Western approach at the time? Well, that was to stubbornly maintain European clothing and stay entirely separate from the locals. They really held tight to their home culture. But Taylor? He took a radically different approach. He completely shed his own culture. Just imagine the shock of seeing a proper Victorian Englishman adopting traditional Chinese robes, growing his hair out into a traditional queue, and living directly among the everyday people.
As you might guess, this paradigm shift was so disruptive that his fellow Western missionaries heavily criticized him for it. By adapting to local customs, he was breaking all the unspoken rules of his peers. He was blurring boundaries that the Western establishment wanted to keep strictly defined. It is your classic innovator's dilemma, right? Doing what's actually effective often means facing intense backlash from your own community.
But his crucial point is captured perfectly right here in his core principle. He firmly believed his message, the gospel, should not be obscured by foreign cultural baggage. His logic was basically, if you want people to hear what you're saying, you can't force them to navigate your unnecessary cultural barriers first. The message was the main thing, not the European wrapping paper it came in.
Okay, moving on to his next big realization. Let's see how this builds. Taylor noticed what we can call the coastal problem. See, most missionaries remained safely and comfortably tucked away in China's coastal cities. And sure, while that was way easier and safer for the Westerners, Taylor recognized a massive strategic flaw there. It left millions upon millions of people out in the interior provinces entirely unreached and isolated from the message.
To solve this problem, Taylor had to take a massive leap. Section 1. The Leap of Faith, founding the China Inland Mission in 1865.
And these core principles completely transformed Protestant missions. First off, the literal geographical mandate, go to the uncharted interior where no one else was going. Second, a strict reliance on prayer over aggressive financial fundraising. Third, a formalized mandate to actually identify with Chinese culture, basically making his radical empathy the new organizational standard. And finally, operating together as an international Christian community. It was just a complete structural overhaul of how mission work was done.
And this quote brilliantly illustrates that incredible reliance on prayer over finances. God's work done in God's way will never lack God's supply. He wasn't stressing over ledgers, He waited for resources to be provided exactly at the right time. That specific conviction inspired countless others who watched his life to place a much greater trust in their own faith and timing rather than relying solely on traditional fundraising mechanics. But make no mistake, Section 2,
The crucible, unimaginable hardship and perseverance. This revolutionary path required a life of immense suffering.
The toll it took on him personally was just staggering. We're talking about enduring serious, life-threatening illnesses. The travel conditions were constantly dangerous, all set against this crazy backdrop of severe political unrest. And most devastatingly, he suffered unimaginable personal tragedy, including the deaths of his wife and several of his children. And through all this grief, he's still facing relentless opposition from Chinese officials and his own Western critics. Yet through this unimaginable crucible, he persevered for decades.
Because of that perseverance, Taylor's highly localized approach eventually paid off. Section 3. A lasting global legacy.
By the end of his ministry, the results were just undeniable. Hundreds of missionaries had joined his cause. Mission stations were established all throughout that once unreached inland China, and thousands of Chinese people engaged with his message. His specific approach to stripping away cultural barriers influenced organizations all around the globe, and the group he founded didn't just fade away into history either. It evolved into OMF International, which is still operating across East Asia today.
After serving for over 50 years, Taylor passed away on June 3, 1905 in Changsha at the age of 73. And he was buried right there in China. It was a really fitting final testament to a man whose lifelong commitment was completely poured out for the Chinese people, a very long way from his origins back in Barnsley.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We've seen how Hudson Taylor literally changed history by refusing to let his own comfortable customs stand in the way of his message. So ask yourself, if true connection really does require radical empathy, what unnecessary barriers or comfortable customs do you need to tear down in your own life to truly reach and communicate with others today? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for learning with me today.